Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review today. I'm here to tell you all about the latest album from Wolfheart, Wolves of Karelia, out April 10th on Napalm Records. The album has 8 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's 5th full-length studio album. Very interesting album, specifically when you look back at the previous record, Constellation of the Black Light, which to me was an album that was very emotionally driven. You could feel the emotion in the solos, in the music, in the vocals, in the approach, in the atmosphere. It was there, it was palpable. To me, this album sees a departure from that emotional baggage to go with a more raw, brutal sound, definitely somber, calculated, cold, and still very melancholic. In the previous record, you got that melancholy there, but it was driven there by the emotion that the record have. To me, on this album, they stripped away that layer of it, and it's just more raw. It just has a raw sound. It has a deepened brutality into the sound, so it comes across differently. So it's still very melancholic, but it's a different approach to that same melancholy. It's delivered in a different format. The album is very consistent in the approach, in the structure that it has. From the first to the last song, it's very linear. There's no peaks and no valleys. It's just an album that's very consistent, song after song after song. Perhaps the main difference is Eye of the Storm, which is an instrumental track that comes right at the middle of the album, that gives you a different element to the record. It really breaks the record. It really gives you this extended piece of instrumental music that is really dripped in a somber vibe and in a very deep melancholic atmosphere, and to me that allows the record to give you a break from all the brutality that it has. It works well because the Hammer is the song that comes before Eye of the Storm, and the Hammer finishes off in an instrumental fashion that really leads into Eye of the Storm. So it really gives you an extended, almost, if you look at both songs and you look at the amount of time in those two songs that gives you this stripped down instrumental piece, you're looking at about 3 minutes. So it really gives you a break in the middle that allows you to reset your senses, to really get ready for the onslaught that comes after, because up until that point the album is so brutal, so driven, that it's almost exhausting. So you really need an interlude, if you will. You really need something in the middle of the record that allows you to catch your breath, regain your conscience, and really get ready for the brutality that comes next. So I like how they combine these two songs and how they put them together in the middle of the album to really offer this really dip in intensity and aggression before things escalate right back again. I also like it from a structural perspective that the album starts with Hail of Steel and it finishes with Ashes, which Ashes was the first single, Hail of Steel was the second. Those two to me are really interconnected. When you listen to the album and if you listen to it on loop, you almost feel like the way Ashes ends, it builds into how Hail of Steel starts. The two songs are definitely intertwined together. They're not part one and part two, but they're definitely siblings, if you will, on this record. So having one as the closing track and having the other as the opening track works extremely well. It allows the album to go full circle. It allows the album to feel concise, to feel together, to feel unified as one. I really like that approach to the structure. I like how they created that track list and how they put those songs in that format. It really allows for the album to have a lot better playability all around. Like I said, especially if you're listening it on loop, you almost lose track of where one song ends and where the other one starts. So you kind of lose track of where you are on the record, which is something that I really enjoy when I'm listening to an album. I want to kind of get lost in the music and not necessarily be a slave to the track list and know exactly which song I'm into at any given time. This album, the way it's structured with these two songs at the top and at the bottom, really allows the album to come full circle and give you that sense of continuity. So I really like that aspect. I cannot talk about a Wolfheart album without mentioning a few things, one of them being the drums. Jonas on the drums, what an absolute beast. This guy is perhaps one of the most underrated drummers in the world of metal. He is one of the main driving forces behind this record. When you look at the brutality that the album has, when you look at the driving force of the record, at least one of the main driving forces of the record, specifically this record, it may not be true to every single Wolfheart record, but to this record, the drums play a huge role. They're definitely behind the driver's seat. They're definitely contributing to the speed of the tracks, the tempo, the magnitude that the songs have, the brutality that the songs have, but even a little bit to the melody that the tracks have. So you cannot look at this album, this specific album of Wolfheart, without talking about Jonas, without talking about the drums, because they are one of the main elements, one of the main forces behind the sound, the robust raw, heavy, brutal sound that this album has to offer. Another element is the guitars. You see a departure of Mika. This album doesn't include him. The last album, The Constellation of the Black Light, was the last album that he was a part of the band. So here you have Vangelis coming in, the new guitar player for Wolfheart, and it gives him an opportunity to shine. It gives him an opportunity to show what he can do. I really like his work on this album. I like a lot of the melodies that are coming out of the guitars. I really like how they were played. Also the brutality that they had, the sound that they had. Overall, the guitars on this album did not disappoint me in any way. It still had that Wolfheart sound. It still had that Wolfheart fingerprint all the way through. Very concise, very well coordinated with the drums. The two really work in parallel with each other as far as the brutality and in some cases the melody of the tracks are concerned. So I really like overall what they've done as far as the guitars are concerned on this album. The orchestration is another element that you have to talk about when you look at Wolves of Karelia. I really like what they did here. They perhaps used, I wouldn't say they used more orchestration, more symphonic elements in this album than in previous records. I don't want to make that call, I don't want to say that, but it's definitely a lot more noticeable on this record. Even if they're not used more, in my opinion, you can tell their presence a lot more frequently on this record than previous records. Perhaps because of the brutality of the album, perhaps because of how raw the record is, how stripped out of emotion and it's just pure aggression and brutality. Maybe because of that, the symphonic elements become more predominant. You can tell more where they are. You can feel their presence within the tracks. But to me, it's a huge component of this record. Most of the melody on this album comes from the orchestration of the record itself. There's still melodic portions that come in from how the drums are used on certain tracks, definitely from the guitars, from the solos of the guitars. But to me, the orchestration, the symphonic elements that this album has to offer, the underlying sound that they give to the songs, because they're not necessarily in the forefront, they're not necessarily this huge element that plays this huge role in each and every single song that almost turns this into a symphonic metal album. That's not the case. But the other underlining use of those elements on a song-by-song basis really allows the songs to have this underlying melody, this incredible melody that just permeates through every single track on the record. So you can't talk about this album and not mention that, because it becomes more obvious with every time you go through it and how important it is in order to give this base, this foundation of melody that's really necessary in order to get the melancholy and the atmosphere that is required from a Wolfheart album. Overall, another masterpiece of a record that's multi-layered, that has so many different aspects to it, that is very raw, very brutal, like I said, and it gives a very strong, pungent sound all around from the first to the last track. I don't rate albums, but to me, Wolfheart has never released an album that hasn't been a 10 out of 10, and this one is definitely not going to be the first that's not a 10 out of 10. Absolutely incredible record, very brutal, very strong, very powerful. Perhaps a little bit of a shift from the previous record, but you don't want the next album to sound like the previous album. You want to see an evolution in the band. You want to see them going somewhere with their sound. You want to see them trying different things, different elements, different approaches. To me, this album is a little bit of that, a little bit of a spreading of the wings, if you will. Great record by Wolfheart. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I want to start off with Reaper. A really driving riff, a really driving song. It just has a lot of power, a lot of forward momentum. The verses really push the song forward. It's more methodic, heavy. There's some faster elements, but it's more methodic and heavy. And then the increase in intensity in the drums, built in with these symphonic elements, the two elements coming together, is absolutely magnificent right before the chorus. You have this absolutely heavy, brutal drums, and then you have this really underlined symphonic melody that just elevates how heavy the drums are. The drums become a lot heavier because of that melody in the background. And then that all builds into the chorus. The chorus is really infused with melody. It gives this sense of a wave. I really like what they did with the guitars and the overall sound of the chorus. There's this sense of waves coming and going. It just works really well with the overall structure that the track has. The chorus is very hypnotizing. The guitar melody of the chorus is very hypnotizing. As you move towards the end of the song, all these three different elements, the symphonic, the brutality of the drums, and the melody of the guitars, all these elements come together, they all join forces, and then is how the song ends. It ends with these three elements coming together and becoming this pure wall of sound coming at you as the track closes. So I really like that approach, the introduction of elements throughout the track and then bring them all together towards the end to finalize the song, to bring the song to a conclusion. Next, the Hammer. I mentioned a little bit about this song. I really like this track. It has a lot of different layers to it, and that's something you're gonna find with every single song on this album. It's really magnificent how they created songs that have so many layers to it, and at the same time feel so simple and sound so raw and brutal and stripped out. So this is another one of those really layered track. The drums play a huge role in this song. The drums are really the heaviness of the track. They're really the driving force of this song that really pushes it anywhere it wants to go. The melodic approach of the symphonic elements is really important. It adds layers to it. It's a different layer that gets added to the overall sound. And then even in the vocals, you got layers in there. So you have Thomas's vocals, and then you have layers behind it to give this extra volume, extra presence to the vocals, giving a lot more texture to the sound and giving a lot more presence to the heaviness, to the harshness that comes with those vocals. So I really like this approach of all these different elements combining together to create a really powerful song. The guitars, specifically with the solo, it's really a blast of melody. Somebody opened the box and all this melody came out, and that's what you get from the guitar solo on this track. Very different from everything else up until that point. The guitar solo really sets the song apart, really breaks the track, because you have a song that's filled with layers, filled with different moving pieces, and then the solo feels just so simple, so beautiful. It really hits you. It's a song that really hits you like a hammer. And then as you get towards the end of the track, it becomes instrumental, it becomes really stripped down, and to me that works really well because you get almost this acoustic guitar, this piano, these two elements coming together, and that strips the song down as he moves into the next track, which is Eye of the Storm, which is an instrumental track that has that stripped down melancholic feel to it. So I really like how this song ends because it allows it to feel somewhat connected to the next track that comes right after. Last but not least, Arrows of Chaos, another song that has a real heavy drum presence. Like I said before, this is an album that really relies, as far as brutality and heaviness, on the drums. It really focuses its attention on that element. The guitars, in my opinion, are holding the map, while the drums on this song are driving the car. You have the co-pilot and you have the pilot. That's how it feels to me. The guitars have the ability to tell the drums where they need to go and where to turn and where to point their focus in their direction. But let's face it, the drums are driving and the co-pilot is the guitars. The vocals come in and add to those two other elements. So you have now these three elements coming together. They join forces to become very destructive, very demolishing, and very melancholic at the same time. It's a song that has a lot of brutality, but is still very sad, very somber, and very melancholic in the atmosphere that it gives with the juncture of these three elements coming together. The symphonic elements on this track add a layer to it. It add a layer of melody. Without it, the song would be absolutely just brutal and demolishing. You need something there to counterbalance that heaviness, to counterbalance that brutality. To me, the symphonic elements do that. They're not overpowering the song. They're just there in order to just shed a little bit of light, shine a little bit of light, if you will, into the cracks of the darkness that it is, this song. And I really like that aspect because it's hidden, it's not in the forefront necessarily. It's just an added layer, an added element to really give life to this song, and it does that throughout the record, giving life through the album. Alright guys, this is it. This is Wolfheart, Wolves of Karelia, out April 10th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.